Welcome to PKF O'Connor Davies Podcast, Nonprofits Insight Out. I'm Lenore Sanchez, Senior Audit Manager specializing in nonprofit organizations. Today's topic is diversity, equity, and inclusion, awareness to action. Joining us to provide insight on this topic is Trifina Martin. Trifina is PKF O'Connor Davies Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager. Trifina, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. You know, for quite some time, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I, has remained a focal topic of discussion. There have been several discussions and studies surrounding the undeniable benefits of organizations embedding DE&I within their organizational strategy. Yet, there often are variations of what a successful, and most importantly, a sustainable program looks like, specifically within a nonprofit organization. Can you provide us with some insight of what a DE&I program encompasses within a nonprofit organization?
Sure, that's a great question, and I always say this is an important topic of discussion. Often when most individuals hear the term diversity, equity, and inclusion, one immediately tenses up, anticipating an uncomfortable conversation, and the mind automatically gravitates towards topics surrounding either race or gender. As a nonprofit organization, it's imperative to clearly define what a successful DE&I initiative, also referred to as a diversity program, looks like. You know, it's one that addresses and celebrates diversity. That's meaning all the ways in which people differ. In equity, the practice of fair treatment, that's when you make sure you provide access and opportunity and advancement for all. And of course, lastly, inclusion. Actively engaging to ensure a variety of voices are heard to facilitate in the decision-making process.
Your point is well taken. Often if a nonprofit organization does not get on the same page concerning aspects of a diversity program, sustaining and measuring that program can become a bit of a challenge.
That's correct. I always say it's essential for a nonprofit organization to work together to help one another understand the importance of a diversity program, and not only the importance, but the great impact of implementing such a program may have. Learning to have frequent conversations surrounding the mission, the overall responsibility, and of course the business case for executing and sustaining the program is what contributes to the success of a nonprofit. Leaders should actively engage, seek out various perspectives in which they elicit and encourage feedback.
Communication is key. Speaking of open conversations, what are some suggestions you may have for a nonprofit organization to ensure everyone is actively involved in aiding to the overall realization of a diversity program?
You know, while there are many, I would say it's important to reinforce how effective the diversity programs can help to align and strengthen a nonprofit's overarching objective. That objective, which is often to improve the quality of life, the communities in which they serve and represent. It's the responsibility of a nonprofit organization to offer services and opportunities that are accessible to all people of all walks of life, as well as creating an environment within the organization that fosters inclusion and provide various individuals the opportunity to share their personal experiences and perspectives. You know, I've found that when people feel a sense of community within the workplace, they become invested in the overall mission. This is what separates organizations who have embedded DE&I into the fabric and those who just view it as a one-off initiative.
That makes a lot of sense. A team approach makes a big difference when working towards the same goal. I noticed you mentioned how important it is to reinforce the positive effects of having a diversity program for a nonprofit. Can you talk more about how essential it is for everyone to understand the business case in supporting the DE&I initiatives?
I'm glad you brought that up. I can't say enough how important it is for a nonprofit organization to explain the business case for having a strong focus on DE&I initiatives. But it's also just as important to have that leadership buy-in. Often diversity programs are started and then ran by employees, but it's essential leadership is also involved in the progress to sustain the program, and it helps push that needle towards improvement. Not only should leadership support a diversity program, but they should also be actively involved. Research has shown that some of the vital objectives for a successful DE&I program require structural changes to the organization, changes that surround such things as policies and procedures, and that will require accountability and that leadership support.
Yes, I can see how that forms the foundation. And with that in mind, can you share some essential pillars and frameworks for a diversity program within a nonprofit organization?
Absolutely. There are about 6 that come to mind. It's important to first form a task force, also known as a DEI council, who meet regularly, or it's also called a committee, to help promote and educate. I'd say, secondly, get everyone on board by defining what DNI looks like for a nonprofit. Consider implementing enhanced diversity trainings that focus on microaggressions and unconscious bias. Thirdly, create a mission statement. The mission statement should outline internal and external commitments. Fourth, outline a strategic plan with a strong focus on DNI objectives by identifying areas of improvement. Fifth, prioritize realistic and measurable short and long term goals with targets.
Those are all great and helpful points. It seems as if you're emphasizing the importance of implementing a diversity program in phases. Can you explain why this is a better format than doing it all at once?
Sure, I can't say enough the value in an organization creating a diversity program in steps. Building upon your D&I initiative, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. But the journey, it takes careful planning and timing. Nonprofits want to be sure they don't rush into action, but instead, I suggest be proactive rather than reactive. If you have not started a diversity program, it's not too late. And if you have, it's always a good idea to revisit the program and reevaluate your previous objectives.
Can you share what some DE&I objectives might be?
Yes, but please keep in mind every nonprofit organization is different, therefore, their makeup and their needs might differ. But just to name a few, some objectives to consider might be first, as I mentioned before, consider enhancing and implementing mandatory diversity trainings. Secondly, coming up with methods on how to recognize various awareness and cultural celebratory days or months. Thirdly, think about creating a DEI budget. Fourth, possibly hiring a diversity manager or consultant if that fits your needs. Fifth, one can also address methods for recruiting a more diverse workforce. And lastly, any ideas surrounding and upholding an inclusive work environment should be important.
Great insight. While every diversity program may not be one and the same, I imagine all phases are essential in ensuring the success of a program. Can you share some helpful pointers a nonprofit should consider when measuring the effectiveness of their diversity program, one that can sustain over time?
Great question. Measuring is important. In general, implementing a diversity program is an extensive process and one that doesn't happen overnight. Nonprofits should always remain flexible and, most importantly, open minded. It's important to keep in mind some areas of measurement are easier to track than others. For example, when we measure diversity, various dimensions can be measured, such as age, race, gender, sexual orientation. Whereas when you're measuring inclusion, that can be a bit more challenging because the feeling of inclusion is obscure. It can be difficult to measure whether your team feels included or welcome. But in general, some methods to measure a diversity program are to first identify what your DE&I metrics are, such as age, race, gender, or ability, and the reason for tracking such metrics. In other words, you want to identify your scope and your purpose. Next, be sure metrics align with the nonprofit's collective value and mission. Third, establish a baseline. Fourth, survey your team, always listen to their needs. And lastly, document processes and progress by tracking and reporting through quarterly or annual reports.
Thank you, Jufina. You provide some great pointers for an inward-facing diversity program. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of nonprofits also focusing their efforts on an outward-facing diversity program?
You're correct. Outward-facing D&I efforts are just as important for a nonprofit organization. It's vital that nonprofits also build external relationships with its stakeholders, such as partnerships, and I consider volunteering. Nonprofits want to ensure they are supporting diverse populations and practicing inclusion. Take a look at your supplier list. Is it diverse? Be certain to support various businesses in the communities in which they serve. Nonprofits ought to be an example of what having a solid impact within their surrounding community looks like.
This was a great discussion. Thank you for providing us with your insights and helpful tools not only to build a DE&I program, but to sustain and measure a successful program.
It was my pleasure for speaking with you. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. PKF O'Connor Davies serves a wide range of nonprofit entities. For more information and/or to connect with Trufina, who works alongside our DE&I team, please visit our website at pkfod.com. Until next time, nonprofits, insight out.